Your playful heart has got me in trouble now.
Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Today I'm going to do my January book reviews part 2. In part 1 I reviewed 4 books and I have another 4 books to review for you. It's been a really great reading month in January. I've read 8 books, which is really good for me, so I'm just going to get straight into the books. So I'm going to start with a classic. This is by an author who I absolutely adore. This is Where Angels Fear to Tread by E.M. Forster. This was originally published in 1905. The title comes from Alexander Pope's essays, which he says in it, where for fools rush in, where angels fear to tread. You might also know it from a Frank Sinatra song, because Frank Sinatra turned that phrase into a song, and it was turned into a film in 1991 with Helena Bonham Carter and Helen Mirren. It's been turned into an opera, and this is Forster's first novel. So now onto this. I'm going to give you the plot and then my thoughts on it, but as always all my book reviews are going to be spoiler free from now on, so no spoilers at all. So this is about a group of English people who are very snobby, and they have a daughter-in-law called Lilia, and Lilia is a bit of a wild one and they don't quite know how to tame her, and it's very intricate, kind of the plot of the characters, because they're not really anything to do with each other. So you have the in-laws, as we'll call them. So you have a group of in-laws that are kind of English and they're from money, and one of their sons married a woman called Lilia, and Lilia's wild, but that son called Charles, he's dead. But Charles and Lilia had a child together called Irma, and Irma spends her time really with the in-laws, really with her dad's family, and Lilia's just kind of this wild character. They're all a bit like, oh, we've tried to tame her, we've got her to come and live with us, but she's just a bit wild. So then Lilia decides to go to Italy, and they're all very happy with it because they're going to keep Irma, and she's going to go off to Italy and have a good adventure. And she's going with this really sensible girl called Caroline. And Caroline is young, but she's kind of described as a bit of a spinster. Even though she's young and good looking, they think like she's really sensible, she's very level-headed. She can go with Lilia and Lilia won't get into trouble because this girl is with her. So then Lilia writes to them and says, I've married an Italian man. And they're all a bit like shocked with the whole situation, but whatever, she's over in Italy. And then she says, we're having a baby together. And that's when the plot really begins, because the in-laws, even though they're no blood relation to Lilia, because of Irma, they're Lilia's daughter and they're obviously looking after Irma, they're just very much like, no, we don't want Irma to have an Italian half sibling, we don't think this is right, we don't think you should marry this man, we don't think you should have a baby. And then Lilia dies in childbirth. And you would think that's kind of where the plot would end, but that's when the story really begins, is Lilia dies in childbirth, and so the in-laws decide that they are going to take the baby, but the baby is of no blood relation to them. The baby is not their family member, because Lilia isn't a blood relation to them, so they have no legal standing over this baby. But because of Irma, they're like, no, we don't want people to think that Irma's sibling is being raised in Italy by Italians, and they're very offensive towards Italian people within the book. And so they're like, no, this is going to be terrible for our reputation. We need to go to Italy, steal the baby back somehow, offer them money or something, take the baby and take the baby back to England, and then we'll have to raise the baby with Irma, and that will be it, because we don't want it to get out that Irma has a half sibling somewhere in Italy. That just won't be good for our family name. So they then, some family members are sent to Italy, and they have to meet up with someone, I think his name is Gino, the Italian guy, yeah, Gino. They have to meet up with Gino, who's the father of the child, and they say, we'll offer you money for the baby and we'll take the baby back. Gino says no, and then the plot kind of goes on from there, and it's about them being in Italy. It's about so many different things. It's really like a grotesque, dark comedy, because it's about the English people's hatred for Italians, but they love Italy. They think Italy's great, they love the culture, they love the cuisine, they love the music, but they just don't like Italian people. They just see them as lesser to them. And that's really when the book kind of takes on from there, is that they just want this child back, but they have no legal right of this child. And then it's really ironic how they think the child is going to be better with them. And if you've read the book, you'll know what I mean, and how it plays out. How they think they're going to be able to keep the baby safer and all this different stuff, and how that plays out is really ironic. A lot of people who like Forster don't like this book. It was his first book. He wrote it up really quickly, and people say like it's just not a great representation of his work. I have read 2 other books from him. I have read A Passage to India and A Room with a View, and they are very different. They are very well thought out. They're very about human nature, whereas this is very kind of grotesque and funny. I really did enjoy this though, but if you're starting with Forster, I would say start with A Room with a View, because none of his other books seem to be like this at all. It's just mad, and I think he was in his early 20s when he wrote this. And it's just all very odd. It's very grotesque comedy, and it is really funny, and then you're laughing at the English people and their prejudices, and then it just turns macabre all of a sudden, and you're like, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't sign up for this, and it's really bizarre, but I really did enjoy this book. I thought it was fabulous. I highly recommend this. Next up, I read a children's book. This is Rummy Nightingale, and this is by Kate DiCamillo, and this was published in 2016. It's set in the 1970s, and it's about a little girl who, she is 10 years old when the book begins. Her father has run away with another woman, and no one knows where her father is. And there's this competition, kind of like a beauty pageant thing, and she decides that if she learns the baton, then she can go on to win this competition, and her dad will see a picture of her in the newspaper, and that will make him come back. It will make him remember her and her mum and come back to them, because they can't get in touch with her dad. So at baton lessons, that she meets 2 other girls, and 2 other girls got their own little struggles, and it goes into them, and they all want something to do with the competition. The competition is going to help them in some kind of way, and it's about their friendship. But it's a series of mini adventures. It's about life and how life is really unfair at times for you. My heart broke like several times throughout. I was like, oh my god. Like, one of the girls is looking for her cat, but you as an adult reading it, it's very obvious her cat's been put down, like her cat's not alive anymore, and she thinks her cat's still alive, and it's like, I did enjoy it. My only criticism of it was, see, this is interesting because I can change my review whilst reading a book. So I was reading it, and right up to the end I was like, this is a really good book. This is really about how life is unfair. I think this is a good book for kids. I think this is a really interesting story and everything. And then at the end the author needed to tie everything up in a bow, Hollywood glam, everything's okay, don't worry. Don't worry, everything's okay. I'm going to make everyone have a happy ending and everything's going to be fine. And it just was really unbelievable, that happy ending within it. But this is, as I said, a children's book, so I don't know if they had to do it because it's a children's book. They can't make it too traumatising, I don't know. But if you read classic children's literature, that's what I normally read. So Frances Hodges and Burnett, stuff like that. I really like how everything isn't tied up, that things do go terribly wrong and they don't come together perfectly, and that's just life. Whereas this book, I felt like they had to put a happy kind of Disney ending on it. And I wasn't here for it. I didn't enjoy that ending, that everything had to be okay. But this is a difficult one to review because whilst I was reading it, I was really enjoying it. And I was really enjoying the different girls' stories and the little things they get up to. I thought was really interesting as well. And there were really heartfelt moments within it. But the end for me kind of let the whole thing down. Next up, I read, this is called Sucking Shrimp. This is by Stephanie Theobald, and this is set in the 70s, and it's about a teenager called Rosa. And Rosa loves a TV chef called Fanny Craddock. Now, Fanny Craddock was a UK TV chef. I'm going to put a picture of her up on the screen here of Fanny Craddock. You might look at this picture and think, is that a comedy act? Is that a parody? That can't be a real person. Fanny Craddock was a real person. She was a very eccentric individual, and I suppose that's why she got her cooking show, is because she was so eccentric and so different and so herself. So she looked eccentric and she behaved very oddly on her cooking show, did very odd recipes that like weren't traditional recipes at all, that were all just kind of car crash madness. And she also very much knew who she was, and that's why I like Fanny Craddock. Fanny Craddock was before my time, but when I became a teenager, I saw her. It was like TV's Weirdest Moments, one of those shows, and she was on that. And then I started Googling her and I started watching her cookery shows, and as a teenager, I really liked Fanny Craddock. Even though by that time she wasn't on TV at all, I just thought she was so odd and interesting. So this is set in the 70s when Fanny Craddock's show was on TV, and Rosa lives in Cornwall. She has a very normal life in the UK, and she really loves Fanny Craddock, and she loves cooking. Cooking is a real passion for her. A new boy starts at her school called Jack, and she befriends Jack, and then Jack's mum is Miss Flowers, and the story is really about Rosa's obsession with her friend Jack's mum, Miss Flowers. Miss Flowers is obviously an alcoholic. and she has a lot of issues, and they used to live in Spain. They've just come back to the UK, and for Rosa it's a complete culture clash because Rosa has always lived in Cornwall. She has never been abroad. She dreams of going to Spain. She really like listens in her Spanish lessons because one day she wants to live in Spain. That's her dream. So then all of a sudden this boy starts in her class, and he's English but he has lived in Spain, and then she goes to the house, and they live in this lovely house, and his mum, Miss Flowers, is a very glamorous, unpredictable woman. And she's unpredictable because obviously she's an alcoholic, but she's very glamorous, very beautiful. She's having affairs with men. She used to live in Spain. She tells Rosa about Spain and everything to do with that, and Rosa becomes completely obsessed and starts cooking for Miss Flowers' dinner parties that she has. It's all very odd. It's all very twisted as well. I would say that. I'm making it sound really light-hearted, and it is. There's a lot of comedy moments within it, and there's a lot of like Fanny Craddock humour within it and different things. And every chapter starts with a different Fanny Craddock quote, which I thought that was really fun to have within it. But it is very serious how Rosa just forms this deep connection, and she's jealous of anyone who's near Miss Flowers. So Jack, his mum is Miss Flowers, and she's like just deeply jealous of Jack. The husband, everyone, she just wants everyone to leave Miss Flowers alone so that Miss Flowers can be her own. She has this horrible obsession with this woman, and then the story goes on from the obsession and what happens because of the obsession. I would say it's really kind of a thriller. It's a comedy thriller because there's so many comedy moments, and it's obviously coming of age because this girl starts off as a teenager. She starts off at 14 and then she's like about 20 at the end of it. So it's about her growing up, but then always having this connection to Miss Flowers, and Miss Flowers tells her things that are kind of inappropriate. Because she's always drunk, because she's an alcoholic, she doesn't have a filter like other adults do. So she's telling Rosa all these deep secrets, and Rosa's already just got this obsession with Miss Flowers. First off, because the way she looks, she's very glamorous, and so she's being pulled into this life. And you can see also how this would happen because Rosa has such a normal life. Her dad makes Cornish pasties, that's a type of food in the UK, and they live above the shop and they have a very normal life, and then all of a sudden there's this kind of glamorous woman that comes onto the scene, and she's very like in awe of Miss Flowers, even though Miss Flowers is such a dysfunctional character. She really is. She neglects her son. Sorry, I'm like excited. I'm like, oh, she neglects her son. She's having affairs with her husband. She's an alcoholic. She doesn't treat Rosa very nicely at times. Rosa is just obsessed, and that's not a spoiler for the book because more stuff goes on from that obsession. I thought this was really interesting. I did enjoy it. I thought it was really good about mental health as well, and how mental health conditions can start from trauma and stuff. And I thought that was interesting because Jack the boy, you can see that he is being neglected terribly by his mother, and his mother, being an alcoholic, is affecting him really badly, and he becomes mentally ill within the story. But then there's so much comedy, and then it's about Rosa's obsession with Fanny Craddock and how much she loves cooking these different recipes and about food and likening that to life. I thought it was just so odd. It was so bizarre and odd, but really interesting. I was really intrigued the moments Rosa was anywhere near Miss Flowers and their interactions. I was really pulled into that. I thought it was a really interesting, bizarre book. I would recommend this one. And then last but not least, it's a book I was sent like over a year ago by the publisher because it became part of Reese Witherspoon's book club, so the book club sent it to me. But this book is called Still Lives, and it's by Maria Hummel, and it's about a woman called Maggie who works in a museum, and there is a famous artist called Kim Lord, and Kim Lord has decided to paint murder victims, female murder victims, and paint herself as the murder victims. So it's a picture of a murder victim. It's kind of what the murder victim was wearing, or an iconic picture of them, but Kim Lord is painting herself kind of over their faces, and the exhibition is going to be called Still Lives. And Maggie works at the museum where the exhibition is going to take place. And then the kind of other thing within it is that Kim Lord is dating Maggie's ex-boyfriend, so you kind of have a little bit of tension between them. Maggie is 28 years old. The exhibition is painting, yeah, Kim impersonating female murder victims, loads of them. And then on opening night, Kim Lord goes missing, and no one knows where Kim Lord has gone. And then the story goes into Maggie kind of turning detective, trying to work out where Kim Lord has gone. But Maggie doesn't like Kim Lord because Kim took her boyfriend away from her, Greg. And so she doesn't really like Kim Lord, she doesn't really like Kim Lord's art, but then she's drawn into this kind of web of, did Greg do it, my ex? Because people always look at the people that are closest to the woman who goes missing, like their husband, ex-husband, men that are close to them, so they're really looking into Greg. One thing I'll say about this book as well is that I was not prepared for the victims that Kim Lord paints. I thought they were all going to be fictional. I thought it was going to be, so there's a bit where Maggie's walking around the gallery and she's like, okay, this is the woman, this is how old she is, and this is how she died, this terrible, horrendous, torturous death. This is how this woman died, this is one painting. Now on to the next painting. And then I decided that I would just Google the women's names to see if they were real, because Nicole Brown Simpson, sorry, O.J. Simpson's wife, she was one of the paintings. I was like, well, I know she's real, so let me Google, and all the women that are used in the exhibition Still Lives are real life murder victims in our world, okay? I hope I'm not explaining this properly, but the victims that the pictures Kim Lord has painted, they are actual murder victims in the real world. In our real world, you can Google them. So every time their name comes out in the book, you can actually Google them and see the pictures, the iconic pictures that Kim Lord has painted of them, which I think is really chilling and adds another layer to it. But my problem with that is that it wasn't said anywhere that they were real murder victims, so I feel like people could read it and think that they were fictional accounts of murder victims. Also, I feel like Maria should have done more of a dedication to those women. She should have dedicated this book to the women, and this isn't anything to do with the story, what I'm saying right now. This was just a real pet peeve. As soon as I realised these women were real murder victims, I was like, where's your dedication? Where's your acknowledgement to these women? You're using their stories to publish your book, and obviously it's become very successful, and Maria is probably a millionaire now because she's part of Reese Witherspoon's book club, and if you're a part of Reese Witherspoon's book club, basically your book has a high chance of being turned into a film, and you get flown out to LA, and you do photo shoots and magazine covers and all this different stuff, and it really helps your career massively. So I just felt, you know, this has been reprinted with Reese Witherspoon's book club on it because it's one of those stickers that you can't take off. Couldn't she have added like a little acknowledgement? Did no one at the publishers think, oh, all these like murder victims, these female murder victims that you're using within your story, do you not think you should dedicate the book to them or their families or do something like that? But there was nothing like that, and I found that odd because the whole conflict of the book is Maggie is thinking, should Kim Lord have even painted these women? She's using these women to profit off, and Kim Lord has decided that she's not going to make money off the pictures, but she's gaining exposure. And it's this big media circus around her latest exhibition. So Maggie's saying she's really using these female murder victims to make money off them, and that's not right. And I just felt like, Maria, sweetheart, you're using them. You're using their stories, their horrific stories, in your book. I don't understand why she didn't, I don't know, it was just such, you know, it's like just pet peeves you about a book and it just kind of clouds your vision. I thought this was an okay thriller. I thought it was good. I didn't see the twists that were coming. It's a good thriller. I thought it was interesting. Just that kept like, I was like, let me go to acknowledgements. She hasn't said anything. Okay, dedication. She hasn't said anything. There's nothing on this book that says like, these women, they're real life women. This is a fictional book, but I put in true crime cases into it, and these women were terribly murdered. I also, once I knew they were real women, it became very difficult to read because the deaths are so horrible. So if you like true crime, maybe this will be for you. I quite like true crime, but I don't like how it was just like one after the other. It was done in purpose of the book because it was saying like so many women are terribly killed, and it was saying there's a thing worse than death. You know, if you're going to be tortured before you die, obviously that's much worse than just being killed. Well, I think we'd all, you know, agree we'd much rather just be killed if we're going to be killed instead of held in someone's basement for a few days. You know, the outcome is death anyway. But it was just one after the other, and it just felt a little bit, there didn't need to be that many of them, just one after the other, like, oh, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one. But I understand why the book did it, to say there's so many women who are killed, there's these innocent women that are just murdered by these madmen. I understand it, but it just got a bit much because I just was thinking, why don't you put like they're real on this so that people No, or put some kind of dedication, like dedicated to these women and all the other murdered women. It just, I don't know, it felt a bit unsincere, that whole thing about Maggie judging Kim when I was like judging Maria, if I'm totally honest. But I thought it was quite a good thriller. I don't think the true crime element needed to be in it. That's just my opinion. I think it could have been a thriller on its own. They could have done fictional accounts of female deaths and that would have been it. They could have done like 3 female deaths and that could have been it. But there was just so many in it that I just don't understand. But I thought it was good. Like while I was reading it, I was hooked by it. I thought it was a good thriller. I thought it was good. I think a lot of you will like it if you like true crime and you like thrillers. Just for me personally, I felt like it was a bit kind of a moral issue I had with it, that Maria hadn't dedicated the book to the women whose stories she'd used, and that also it just felt a little bit sensationalist, like, oh, how can I make this book a little bit more edgy and a bit more exciting? Oh, I'll just recount horrendous real life murders because that will get everyone on the edge of your seats, and it did, because you were thinking, oh my god, what's the next murder? Oh my god, it's worse. Or what's the next one? Oh my god, it's worse. But you know, anyone can do that. Anyone can do a true crime book. Like I have a book called True Crime Diary where it's crimes that have happened on that date. So it'll say like May 15th, this terrible murder happened in 1995. May 24th, this terrible murder. And it's just like terrible, this book of terrible true crime murders. And I just, putting that in a thriller, I wasn't sure. Also, I'm never really sure the crossover of real life things in fiction. So to have, this is obviously fiction, but it had real true life crime cases within it, and I just wasn't quite sure about that, because it'd be one minute like, oh, this woman was terribly murdered, and the next minute Maggie was remembering when her and Greg went on holiday together. It was just like, what? Like, that's so mundane when you've spoken about this terrible thing that happened to this woman. Whereas I feel like the crossover does work in some books, like this book, because the teenage girl loves Fanny Craddock and there's a lot about Fanny Craddock, and obviously Fanny Craddock was a real life person, but it works within this because she's a celebrity. It's much more upbeat, but true crime kind of mixed into a fiction story. Like, it'd be like a retelling of the Manson murders. For me, I would feel it was a bit disrespectful to the victims. I've rambled on for way too long, so I'm going to end this video here. Tell me what your thoughts and feelings are on all these books. I hope you have liked this review video. Also, I'm wearing earrings that are on my Etsy, and I think, oh, my necklace as well. This is like a dried flower pendant thing. This is also on my Etsy, so check out my Etsy because I make loads of jewellery and put it on there. I also put up loads of books on there to sell as well. So this is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon for another video.